Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Timothy, My Son, as we look at 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6, and the first part of verse 8. Godliness with contentment is great gain, but if we have food and clothing, we'll be content with that. Godliness with contentment is great gain. What about godliness without contentment? For that matter, what is contentment? There's a picture of Steph Curry's running shoes, basketball star, manufactured by Armour. They have initials on them. They sell for about $200 US, and he has written a portion of Philippians 4:13 in Sharpie. I can do all things. Once again, context is king. Since Paul is addressing contentment here in 1 Timothy, and he teaches more about it in Philippians, let's look at Paul's words to the church in Philippi. I rejoiced greatly in the Lord, he wrote, that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Philippians 4, verse 10 to 13. Apparently, the church in Philippi was concerned about Paul and wanted to share a little love with him. It's funny because first he says, at last you renewed your concern for me. It sounds like there's a little bit of Paul's humor coming through there. Like, I've been waiting for you to tell me that you love me. Just kidding. I know you were concerned. You just hadn't been able to show it. But thanks anyway. But the fact is, Paul knew that the Lord was the one who was looking after him. He always had, and he always would. Nothing's changed, whether he's being beaten and left for dead and put on trial, even though he was a Roman citizen, thrown into prison, being shipwrecked. God was with him. After all, to live in Christ and to die is gain. He knew what it was to have huge needs and to have plenty of those needs filled. Sometimes he was able to minister full-time because others were footing the bills, and sometimes he had to seek employment as a tent maker. Whatever his circumstances, Paul was good with it. So Paul says, I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Paul's contentment was a direct result of his trust in God. A number of years ago, we faced a challenge in our lives that was quite devastating. I was a chaplain at a medium security prison, expecting to stay there for several more years and eventually retire. The pay was good, the benefits all that we required, and I loved what I was doing. Suddenly, it was gone. It was a Friday morning when I got the news, and my mind went into a tailspin. I had no idea where to go from here. I didn't know what to do, who to do it with, or what would come next. We were crushed. That night, as we went to bed, I remember lying there with my mind going 1,000,000 miles an hour, with every conceivable thought coming into it, and the possibilities swirling out there somewhere. Tossing and turning for several hours, I don't think I'd actually had any sleep, when out of the darkness I heard, Phil, I've got this. Okay. After a few seconds, my mind began to race again, and I charged one more time down that path of what-ifs, and again I heard this voice, Phil, I've got this. Huh? This time I listened more, and I heard, Phil, you can quit worrying. I've got this. And I remembered Samuel as a young boy, hearing the voice of the Lord and thinking it was the priest Eli. So he ran to the old man, who said he hadn't called. Confused, Samuel went back to bed, but he heard the voice again. Running again to Eli, he learned that he hadn't been summoned. Back to bed. It happened a third time, and this time Eli realized what was going on and said, Go and lie down, Samuel, and if he calls you, say, Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And he did. In the midst of my confusion, the Lord was reminding me, I've got this. Well, whatever it is, God's got this. Relax and be content.